All right, this here is my Broil King Signet barbecue. I think it's about 10 years old. It was working okay up until recently when some of the burners failed and the tube that runs across the front that we're going to see also failed. Pretty normal symptoms of old age on a barbecue like this. So instead of going out and buying a new one, I thought I'd take a stab at doing a rebuild on this. And I know there are a few other videos discussing these things on the internet, but I ran into a couple of problems that all of the other videos that I looked at really skimmed over, and these are really the tough part. So the first thing I ran into is removing the old screws. These are the new screws holding in the burners, but the old ones were unrecognizable as screws or bolts or anything that had a head on it. They had just disintegrated, or rather corroded, into a kind of a shapeless, lumpy rust that was very difficult to dislodge. So I ended up using a combination of, I tried drilling it out without success. Then I started trying hammering away on them and bashing them, and finally tried to get a grip on the heads with the vice grip, but I just couldn't grab the heads. There was nothing there. Put WD-40 in them, and that didn't dissolve anything. Finally, I thought I would just kind of take a hint from my local muffler shop, and I got out, I have a couple of little lighters that are actually not like a Bic style lighter that just flickers, but they actually project a flame, kind of like a little torch. So I did use that and probably spent a minute or two heating each of these heads up, and then repeated the process of still quite a bit of brute force, grabbing at them with the vice grips, tightening it really tight, and then finally what did work was starting to do a motion of moving the vice grips back and forth, and I could feel those bolts finally coming out of their threads. So that was quite a long process that no one else really went into. The second part of this is once you lift the tubes out, which came out without too much trouble, the old tubes, you just, as you'll see in some of the other videos, you just undo that bolt, lift them out, and they slip out from this end, and then the whole thing just lifts out of the barbecue. So the issue I ran into, which also in the other videos, all of them just show these new tubes just slipping in on this end effortlessly and lining up with the tubes, and this is behind the control. So there is a tube coming straight out of that control that has to go into the end of the burner tube, and for some reason that took a great deal of wiggling and trying to line them up, and I finally got the right two tubes to line up, and this one on the left absolutely wouldn't. And after working on it for quite some time and starting to look underneath and see if I could hold the tube to, if you look underneath your barbecue, you'll see that you can see the end of that tube down there. It's down around here. If you can see that, I'm going to have to lay on my back to get that shot. There's one of them right there, so that you can see, and there are two screws holding each of those controls on. There's also a screw underneath here that you can loosen up to remove this panel, and then if you remove the two screws behind there, you'll eventually get to the point where the whole control starts to move around enough that you can then, sorry about the blurry shot here, it was then possible to line up the tube with the hole, and it's just not going to work if you don't get that tube lined up. I don't know what the design flaw is here, because it appears that these things are made to slide together quite readily, but I'm just wondering if when this thing was first assembled, maybe somebody didn't get the three controls in at quite the right angle. Whatever it was, that after much head scratching did the trick, and some crawling around underneath, and so I got all the three tubes in, put on the new collector tube here. I also discovered, which I never knew, was that my spark mechanism actually had a battery in it. I thought it had failed about 6 months after I got the barbecue, and ever since I had been pulling out all the grills, lighting it with a lighter, and going from there. So when I went into the shop to get the parts, I'd mentioned that the lighter had failed, and he said, well, did you try the battery? And I said, I didn't know it had a battery. Sure enough, a new battery, and now it's sparking just fine and lighting all the burners. I don't have the propane turned on right now, so I guess that you will have to take my word that it did all work out, but the real problem was not certainly electronic, but this whole mechanical issue in here that was skimmed over in the other videos. So I hope this helps some of the people that were scratching their heads after watching the other 3 or 4 videos, and that this will put your mind to rest. There is a way of doing this, but it's no one mentioned having to remove controls and go in from the back of the control tube. So that's my contribution to barbecue repair for the next 10 years, I would say. Thanks.